All right. Hey guys, today we have a presentation on malaria eradication. My name is Abdul.
My name is Vincent.
My name is Nikhil.
And my name is Semi.
Awesome. And we're going to be presenting you a presentation on malaria eradication. So I'm going to start with introduction, a brief overview of malaria. Malaria is a life-threatening disease. It spreads with mosquito bites and causes those infected to feel very sick. They get fevers, chills, and other flu-like symptoms. These effects, especially in third world countries, can be very fatal. Over 3 billion people are at risk of infection every year, with 230 million contracting it in 2018 alone. On average, 405,000 are killed by it every year, with 2/3 of those being kids. This is clearly a very serious disease, and that is why over $3.1 billion have been invested in finding a solution. Unfortunately, not all the methods found have been as effective or useful as we'd like them to be. So now for the background. Who does it affect? Primarily, people in the poorest world regions tend to be the most effective. Why? Because they lack the resources to treat it there. Antimalarials, clean hospitals, clean tools, all of this is a lot harder to come by. And a lot of people end up dying. This is a very big issue, but we also find other people affected, like pregnant women and locals. With pregnant women, malaria ends up malnourishing their bodies, and because of this, their children are born very underweight. This causes developmental issues throughout their whole life, and can be a very serious consequence. And for the locals, well, they use insecticides to try and stop malaria, which is fine and dandy. It kills off the mosquitoes, but then it has a similar effect on the people, and it can compromise their immune system and provide issues throughout their whole life.
All right, so what is the problem here? The problem statement of this global health priority is the traditional methods of eliminating malaria are not making sufficient progress. The 228 million cases in 2018 represent a decline of 20 million cases since 2011. However, this is viewed as insufficient progress. Three main effects are responsible for the decrease in effectiveness. Firstly, the pesticides used in the vector control method, popularized since the 1960s, pose risks to human health and the environment. Like the most effective compound, such as DDT, has since been prohibited due to their health effects. Secondly, the mosquitoes themselves have begun to develop resistance to these pesticides, making them less effective. And lastly, the vector control method requires the careful crafting of strategies to be developed for each locale. The low priority areas are not receiving the same resources and are often unable to benefit, thus making individual solutions costly and difficult to scale.
All right, so I'm going to be talking a little bit about the methods of eradication. So I'm actually starting with what Semi was mentioning, which is vector control. It's been a method that has been used since the 1960s as a one-size-fits-all approach. So using a specific chemical called DDT, and it was a huge widespread movement, and the results were very drastic. As you can see from the data that is shown on the slide, you can see where the mosquito population completely bottomed out. For example, in India, the mortality rates decreased by 80%, and the cases reduced from 75 million in 1947 to just under 50,000 in the 60s. But as a result of this, we found that DDT was a harmful chemical to the humans and as well to the environment. And in particular, funding also evaporated and basically led to the mosquito population rebounding and malaria also rebounding as a result. So what are we using? What other method are we actually using to solve this? So what we've come up with is genetically modified mosquitoes, and they basically created mosquitoes that are resistant to malaria, so then they don't carry the disease. So when you're bitten by a mosquito, you won't get malaria. And this has been proved to be promising, as 80 to 96% reduction has been found when field studies were done with dengue fever. There's largely sweeping plans to implement these in the next coming decades, and it's coming soon. So right here you can see a implementation timeline. So we're currently in the stages of regulatory approval and public consultation, and we'll soon be seeing these out in the wild.
Taking the discussion from Vincent, just like to summarize some points. Over time, malaria eradication has become one of the biggest goals of health organizations around the globe, causing 405,000 deaths alone in 2018, with 67% of that total population being children. It causes a real big problem to health authorities. The effort to take down this disease has not always been consistent, and funding has always been taken away at most crucial points, specifically around the 60s. The first method that was used to eradicate malaria was the method of vector control, DDT, which was used and seemed to have a positive effect on the issue. However, after budget cuts, a rise in infection was seen from the 70s to the 60s, which also resulted in the rebounding of the pathogen and immunity amongst the mosquitoes from the DDT methods. So this also takes us back to the problems that Semi also mentioned beforehand. The pesticides caused health concerns. The mosquitoes were developing immunity to the pesticides, and the pesticides themselves had a low scalability amongst locales because of how each locale was set up. The DDT's effect on the environment was different, so each time it needed to be deployed differently, which cost a lot of money, specifically 3.1 billion USD. So after extensive research and idea making, they came to the conclusion of genetically modified mosquitoes, which has its positives, which is it's effective against malaria. However, we have no idea how it affects the environment and the food chain, which is a essential part of the environment. However, this method has gained a lot of traction and social acceptance, and around third world countries, especially where the disease is still rampaging through.
All right, so in conclusion, malaria has been responsible for countless deaths in the developing world for over 60 years, with 220 million cases in 2018 alone. For the future prosperity of these developing nations and for the benefit of the whole world, the eradication of the disease has been of utmost priority. While traditional methods like vector control have made a lot of progress over the decades, the effects are now diminishing, and new strategies and technologies must be developed to combat the disease. The introduction of malaria-resistant genetically modified mosquitoes represents both a technological opportunity that may completely eliminate the virus, as well as an ecosystem risk carrying significant ethical consequences. Okay, thank you for listening to our presentation.